And we should get rid of a lot of these constitutional funds that are dedicated funds, because that oftentimes moves money outside of the spending limit so they can do what? Spend more. We need less of that. That shouldn't be a part of this anymore. Hello, welcome to this week's Economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. We've got a lot to talk about, but I really want to focus on state policies and what should be done this next year. So let's get to it, okay? In January, many state legislatures will begin their legislative session. In this special edition of this week's Economy Show, I share state and local policies that will equip state leaders to help boost their economies and help their citizens prosper. That's what I'm all about. Let people prosper, right? I will outline 3 solutions that I think have the greatest capacity to let people prosper where they reside, whichever state this may be. As a thank you, Substack subscribers can download my complimentary Let People Prosper policy agenda. You can watch this episode and others on YouTube and wherever you get your platforms. Check out my website, vanceginn.com, and my Substack, vanceginn.substack.com, and you'll have everything that you'll need, okay? So, number 1, limit government spending. Many states are facing fiscal crises driven by unsustainable spending habits. States need to adopt more sustainable budgeting practices or risk higher taxes that stifle the private sector and create less opportunity for us to grow and have, increase our wealth and everything else in the process. If federal and state governments had limited spending growth to the combined rate of population growth plus inflation as a maximum over the past decade, American taxpayers could have saved over $2.5 trillion in taxes and debt in 2023 alone. This figure would be even higher if we compounded over the entire period of those savings and if local governments were included as well. My proposal here is that we need state and local spending limits. Strong state and local spending limits, okay? States should implement strict spending limits to curb unnecessary growth in state and local government budgets. This should be something like the constitutional limitation that's in Colorado called the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, or TABOR, that's based on a spending limit of most state and local spending. It's been weakened over time by progressives, so it should be strengthened. But that should be the guidepost, I think, for all the states to limit on population inflation. Some other states like Texas and North Carolina have been doing a good job of this as well. But also it should be on the local level too, okay? And that's what's been able to help Colorado not have extravagant spending and debt and everything and higher taxes, even though they've moved blue several years ago. This spending limit has really kept them in check. So even if you're a red state right now, like Texas and some others that are out there, and doing a pretty good job on some fiscal issues, that won't always be the case. And sometimes even when they are red states, like in Texas, they're still spending way too much. And so that's why we need strict spending limits in place. And then, oh, by the way, in these blueberries in a sea of red, if you think about the Democrats, having control of a lot of cities and local governments in Texas and other places, they need limitations as well. Spending is the main driver of the higher property taxes and other taxes that are out there, okay? It's all about spending being the main burden. We've got to put constitutional restraints in place as soon as possible. All right. So the key components of a spending limit is a spending limit should apply to the entire budget. I mean, even including federal funds at the state level, okay, and the local level, because all that money are coming from who? The taxpayer. The government has no money. We should have as many restrictions on them as possible to reduce and remove the discretion. And so that way we can allow things to happen. At some point, I think we should have governments run by computers and get government out of the way for most things. All right. But until then, we need these sort of fiscal rules in place. These limits should be based on the average rate of population growth plus inflation over the previous 3 years, or whichever period you want to look at. But there should be some sort of average to smooth out the up and downs over time. And remember, the population growth plus inflation, I don't necessarily think it's the perfect thing, because we need zero growth or even declining budgets across the country. But it does provide a good maximum for the government to hit, because it's a good measure of the average taxpayer's ability to pay for government spending. As you have increasing population, you have inflation that's historically tied to wage growth. That allows for more payments to government, but doesn't create an impediment or too much of an impediment to economic growth. Anytime government gets in the way or spends money, that's taken out of the productive private sector. Okay. So you're going to have trade-offs here. The issue is, how can we reduce those limitations and those impediments as much as possible? Any increase above the threshold of the spending limit should be approved by a supermajority vote 2/3, something like that. The sound policy should also direct budget surpluses, which will result from higher economic growth, more tax revenue coming in, you're restraining government spending, so you have more of a surplus, should go towards tax cuts and debt reduction rather than fueling additional spending. And we should get rid of a lot of these constitutional funds that are dedicated funds, because that oftentimes moves money outside of the spending limit so they can do what? Spend more. We need less of that. That shouldn't be a part of this anymore, okay? And benefits of spending limits. Spending limits protect taxpayers by preventing unchecked government expansion. They promote economic growth by allowing American households and businesses to retain more earnings, investment, and expand their approach. And additionally, spending limits builds financial resilience, reducing vulnerability to economic downturns and promoting stability at the state and local levels. I'm for some sort of a fund. That Texas has the Economic Stabilization Fund, but some sort of rainy day fund that's out there. But it should be very limited. There's too much money in a lot of these rainy day funds these days. Instead, that should be returned to the taxpayers quickly as possible. And if there are unforeseen revenue shortfalls from natural disasters or recessions or something else, the focus should be on spending less, not finding ways to spend more and then bring in this additional money. So these incentives are in place. Remember what Milton Friedman said? We want incentives in place for the wrong people to do the right thing. And that's especially what we need in government. Okay. Number 2, pass pro-growth reforms. The situation here is that state level tax cuts and streamlined regulations are key to fostering economic mobility and financial independence. Excessive regulations such as restrictive labor laws and burdensome occupational licensing create significant barriers, particularly for marginalized communities, single mothers, minority-owned businesses, and small entrepreneurs. So my proposal is that you need to pair tax cuts with spending restraint, as I talked about before. You need both of these to be in place at the same time, or you run into the Kansas problem of the last decade. And it also allows for you to have even more tax relief over time because of those surpluses that are in place. So you've really got to control spending, okay? Reduce and reform regulations. Excessive regulations hinder business growth and job creation. It's around us all the time. These are really hidden taxes. You know, here in this room, there's regulations on the lights. There's regulations on how much building there needs to be in certain places and direction of things and everything else. Just in my house, much less in other things throughout the economy, we need to try to remove a lot of these barriers, zoning regulations, and other things that are out there to allow for people to prosper. Regular reviews should eliminate outdated regulations, focusing only on those that serve a clear public safety or health purpose. For example, most occupational licensing should be eliminated. There should be very few professions where public safety is really at risk. Maybe doctors, but other than that, I really don't think anything else should have a license. It should be done by the private market through organizations and other things. You know, there could be credentials and other things that are certificates that could be provided. But why does the government need to be involved at all in this? They don't. This should be done to the private sector, okay? And why this matters is because these reforms will increase economic opportunities, promote job creation, and support self-reliance. By reducing regulatory burdens and lowering taxes and spending, states can foster a thriving economy, boost entrepreneurship, and create an environment where individuals and businesses can reach their full potential. Number 3, provide universal school choice. The situation is the current public school system, the monopoly that's out there, fails many families, particularly those from lower income households, by limiting access to quality educational opportunities. Many people who have means can move to an area that has a good government school, right? So there is some school choice when that's involved. They also have the means oftentimes to send their kids to private schools or home schools or something else. But those without means don't have that. But we also shouldn't restrict the universal school choice to only those without means, because then that doesn't provide the competition that's needed throughout the entire economy or the higher education system. We also got to think about those with means are also getting a huge subsidy. They get a subsidy to go to the government schools, oftentimes $15,000, $17,000 like it is in Texas. I mean, they're already getting this amount of money for a subsidy. Why is there such a pushback for getting that money in parents' hands instead through universal education savings accounts, which allows for them to choose the public school that's in their area or any other public school, a private school, homeschool, op-ed, co-ops and things of that nature. And also tutoring and other things and transportation if it's needed within that amount of money. I've actually put forth an idea in Texas where I think instead of spending $17,000 per student of the 5.5 million kids, which is about $93 billion, that instead they should send out $12,000 amounts for education savings accounts for only education related approved items. And then if they do that for the 6.3 million school-age kids, where not all of them, of course, go to public schools. A lot of them go to private schools and homeschools. So there's 6.3 million estimated school-age kids. That amount of money would be about $75 billion. That's a $18 billion cut in spending that should be used to reduce property taxes, not putting more into the bureaucratic government bloat that's known as the government school system. I think that's a great opportunity, right? Because ESAs promote educational equity, allowing every child to reach their full potential and contribute to more robust, prosperous communities. I've talked about this already, but my proposal is that students and families win with school choice, especially universal school choice. That should be what it's all about, not funding more of the government school system that's failing, but actually putting money in the hands of parents so that they can decide what's going to be best for their kids. This also creates a greater value for taxpayers. ESAs are education funding effectively by targeting dollars to programs that meet families' needs rather than funding an inefficient monopoly system. ESAs make an educational spending more impactful, providing better opportunities for students and taxpayers. And this is states' role in school choice, okay? States have a unique opportunity to lead by implementing universal ESAs, setting an example for how empowering families benefits everyone. By adopting ESAs, states can ensure that education dollars are spent directly on student outcomes rather than on bureaucratic systems. Ultimately, states should champion education policies that enhance personal agency and economic opportunity, creating a competitive and thriving educational landscape. And I don't think this should be done at the federal level. Okay, there's some discussion about ESAs and vouchers at the federal level. Get the federal government involved out of education entirely. It's not a constitutional role for government. We should end the Department of Education, leave it to the states and the people. That's really what this should be about at the end of the day. All right. So with all that, don't forget to get your complimentary guide on all these policies and more at my website, and also at my Substack. But also go back and check out other things as well. I hope you have a great set of holidays over this holiday festive season. I just love this time of the year. So thanks for joining me in this episode of This Week's Economy. For more insights, visit vanceginn.com and get a paid subscription to my Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com today, so you receive all of these in your inbox each and every time they come out. God bless you and let people prosper.